Hello to you, I'm Hazel from Hazel A Patterns and welcome to my latest video. This video makes the Sew and Sew side pouch. This is it here. This is the one from the pattern, and as you can see it is designed to fit all of your gardening tools. Or is it? It's also designed to fit all of your sewing tools. So hence why the odd spelling, it is deliberate. Sew and sew. So the pattern which you will need to have to be able to make this is here, and you can see it's a condensed pattern, has 14 pictures which are all illustrated with extra lines and things to help you see where you're sewing. And as well as that, you get a 12-page pattern. Every pattern piece is here, but I've also given you the sizes for just in case you want to use your rulers for the rectangular parts. And most importantly, you get this, which is the cutting chart. And this chart, if you follow this, I would suggest print it out every time you go to make the pattern, and then you can use it as a tick chart, and it will help you to see exactly which pieces to cut out. The pattern itself also has instructions on how to print. You'll be buying it as a PDF, which is instant download, and then you can print it at home. So let me just show you some of the features of this pattern. The main thing is you've got various items of storage which are on the outside. So you've got some loops to put things just here. You've got a big pocket here which is for whatever you like. My dad, who is a gardener, wanted me to design this for him, and he wanted string. So we have string in the front and scissors next to it. You've got a big square pocket here which fits your seed packets, and most importantly you've got a holster for your secateurs. And when you come to the sewing version, that same holster, everything is exactly the same, designed to fit your scissors. And naturally, I had to make it big enough to fit a phone, because who wants to be running around places and have your phone go off and not be within reach? So that's the sewing version there. What we're making today is this one. So you may have seen these fabrics before. I've used them to make a couple of other items. And so this one is for me. I'll probably use it for the next video to make sure I've got everything to hand. And I've also made a slight change in that I have actually added some poppers to it. Not very well. I am not the world's greatest popper person, but you know, it does the job. It means if I'm wearing jeans, I'm already wearing a belt, I can actually just tuck it over. But the rest of the pouches are designed with loops on the top, stitched on, and you can either make a belt, or if you have a family member who likes to buy those cargo trousers or things that have belts already, they end up in a little heap somewhere because they're not very brilliant belts, but they're perfect for something like this. So without more ado, let's get sewing. Before you begin sewing, you are going to cut out all of your pieces. So the cutting chart here on page 12 actually shows you which pieces you're going to cut out. And what I suggest you do is every time you make this, if you use this as a tick chart to work out what you're going to cut out. And then you are going to fuse all of your pieces. Now you can either fuse them after you've cut them out, or what I usually do is fuse them in bulk beforehand, and then with the two fabric A pieces you're going to fuse fleece over the back, over the top of the interfacing. So the next thing you're going to need to do is decide whether you're going to transfer all of your pattern markings now or whether you're going to do it as you go along. Now, this is the original one that I made for the pattern, and as you can see it is a white fabric, so I decided to use method 1, which was dressmaker's tracing paper. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that today because I've chosen to use a black fabric. Haha, because who wants to do it the easy way? So, what I'll do is quickly show you how you would use the dressmaker's tracing paper. This is the one I have. This is a Burda. I only have it in the blue and red. Now, if I had it in the white and yellow pack, then I would be able to easily use it on the dark fabric. But I will just show you. So the first thing you do is get your pattern piece exactly as you will for all of the methods. And you're going to lay your piece of tracing paper down. So this is slightly tricky because you have to work out where your fabric is and where your tracing paper is. But then it's really straightforward. Just start it, roll it along with the dressmaker's tracing wheel, and there we go. You have a nice little line of dots. So I don't know if you can see that easily. Hopefully, yes. Now the main thing with this method is you need to make sure you can get it off the marks. So there is a way around that. If you can't get the marks off, what you would do is actually, when you place your items on, you could actually just slightly place them over the marks. Obviously that means that when you do the elastic, you would be left with marks underneath. So I wouldn't use that method with the elastic if you can't get the marks off. But I'll just show you quickly. The easiest method to get them off is slightly soapy water or baby wipes. This is a washcloth with soapy water. So you need to be sure that your fabric is washable. And as you can see on this one, it is coming off. It's a little bit of a work. But if it didn't come off, as I said, either put your storage item that you're making over the line so it covers it, or use a different method. So this is method number 2. This is pretty straightforward, much easier if you're doing it on something with straight lines. So I'm going to take my awl and carefully make holes going down. Now you could just make a hole at each end on the straight line, which I will do on this side. Depends on how well you think you'll see your mark. I'm working on the idea that my marks might fall onto something light so I won't see them. So place my pattern piece on, and you can either take your chalk triangle, or if you've got a chalk pencil like this one, and just go through and make the marks. So this one done at either end. The reason I'm not suggesting using a friction pen on this, which I know a lot of people do love their friction pens, is because you often find that it will leave a mark on fabric, and because these marks will be on the exterior, you know, things are being placed within the marks, you need to be a little bit careful. So I can see these on this side, they have transferred through because I did multiple marks. So that's my top mark going through to my bottom mark. And this chalk does definitely come off very easily with a little bit of water. So the other side, oh, I can actually see both marks, hooray! That was really lucky. The only problem with the chalk pencils, you have to not be too heavy-handed with them. So that one there, nice and easy, straightforward lines. If you need to redraw them partway through, just lay the pattern piece down and do it all again. I'll do the same with the other one in a bit. I'm now going to show you method 3, and this one you have to be a little bit careful because I am going to be using a scalpel. You could use your scissors. I'm actually just going to cut around the shape that I want to trace onto my fabric. So I'm doing it on 3 sides so that so I can flip it up, and then I'm actually just going to draw within. There we go. So what I'm going to do then, fold it up to the top. I think a lot of people do this when they're putting handles on their handbags. So this makes it really easy. Again, line that up like before. I'm going to use my chalk triangle this time, just for a change. And there we go. I'll hold it up so you can see more clearly. So nice chalk mark on that one. This one, again, we've got a nice chalk line. So if you're sure your friction pen isn't going to leave any mark, then you're welcome to use it, or an air drying pen, but this is the methods I use. So I'm going to go and finish off these last 2 marks, and then we will get to sewing. So the first thing we are going to tackle with this pattern, we're going to work on the 2 pieces of storage that go onto the pocket. So we're going to do the elastic first because it's easiest to do that when it's everything's completely flat. Now, I know in the previous segment I said there are 3 methods of transferring marks. There's actually a 4th method that can help you, which I've used in a couple of my patterns, and that's washi tape. So let's move that out of the way. You can see I've got the placement markings on here in chalk for the elastic pocket, so we know that's the space it's going to take up. But to make our lives a bit easier, I'm going to use this washi tape, and I'm going to transfer the marks onto it and then transfer the washi tape onto the fabric. So the easiest way to do this is, first of all, put your washi tape on the actual pattern piece. It's easily removable, unlike sellotape, so you should be able to lift it up very easily. And all I'm doing, I'm literally tracing over the marks I've got on this pattern, including, very importantly, where the beginning and end is. And I'm going to do 2 pieces to show where the elastic goes actually on the fabric. This is interesting. This is particularly interesting washi tape. It does take off some of the marks, which the previous one I used didn't. But so I could say to you, just check before you do that if you're planning to reuse the pattern. So what I'm going to do then is place it underneath my chalk mark like that, and you can see you've got the lines there. I'm going to do the same again. Actually, it's probably going to take the other half of the marks off, but hey ho. Yes, this is obviously super sticky washi tape, unlike the one I usually use. So this is actually taking some of the paper off, so never mind. It means it won't come off the fabric while you're in the middle of sewing, so that's a bonus. So there we go, just stick that above the fabric there. So we've now got the lines we're going to stitch on here. Let's get rid of that. Now we have the stitching guide for the elastic itself. So again, I'm going to place that over the middle, transfer the markings. I mean, the alternative to doing it this way is to mark everything on in chalk, but this does make it a bit more visible. Just be a bit careful if you use a pen or something rather than the pencil on the washi tape, because you can find that it doesn't dry properly and then you transfer pen everywhere. You can tell I've had lots of fun when I was practicing with these methods, because I have, anything that could go wrong has gone wrong with me, so hopefully that make life easier for you. Yep, there we go. Also, I use a laser printer, so it could just be that all of this has happened because it's toner and it's coming off. There we go. So I'm going to pop that right across the middle there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to fold in that first section there. So that's a quarter of an inch. And I'm actually going to use a bit of glue. That's my usual favourite fabric glue stick. Here we go. I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then the easy way to do this is peel that tape back and place the elastic where shown on here, and use the tape to hold it in place so you don't have to worry about pins. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. That's come up on this side, but I can just do it again. And then we're ready to go over to the sewing machine. So we're going to experiment a little with positions for the camera as we did last time. One day I will find the perfect setup, but for now, hopefully you can see exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm going to start by stitching down one end of the elastic. I'm stitching over the washi tape because you can pick that off afterwards. So I'm going to sew round in a little box. So lift up the foot, move it across, and I'm actually just going to reverse all the way back. And you can see I'm stitching on the lines that I did before. I've chosen a thread that's the same colour as the elastic and the same colour as the fabric, so we shouldn't see any issues. So that's one end. You can hear my machine's making some funny little noises. I probably did something to it in the move, but I couldn't tell you what. So let's hope we can get through this, and then I can send her to the machine doctor if necessary, otherwise known as the sewing machine man. Right, let's do the other end. So here we go. You can see we've got a loop, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to pull that and just hold it tightly with my hands against the mark so I can see that I'm stitching in the right place. I'm going to do the same thing again, stitch around in a little box. There we go, so we can now pull off the pieces of washi tape. And then any smaller pieces that get left over, we weed using this awl. And there we have it. So we're going to trim the threads, and then we're ready for the next stage. Now we're going to make the front pocket. So let's take our two pieces. They're identical, so it doesn't matter which one is the front and which one is the back, unless you've got a preference to a particular part of the print. And what I always like to do with things like this, because you've got some sort of unusual angles here that you're not really going to be able to tell exactly where to stop, and also the curves, I like to get things symmetrical if possible, so it makes it easier because you're pretty sure everything is going to fit. So what I'm just going to do is use my straight ruler to give me a bit of a guide as to where to stitch. Then when I go to stitch, instead of using my 1/4 inch foot, I will use my open-toed foot so I can really see where I'm stitching, and I will stitch along the lines. The scissor holster as well will have the same issue in that you've got funny points that to get them nice and accurate, it's easier to draw the seam allowance on first. You might hear in the background my kitty, one of my two cats, is mewing like crazy, making me feel very guilty for being in here and working. But there we go. So that's 1/4 inch seam allowance drawn on. The other thing I like to do then, if I'm going to spend this time doing this, is just draw on a couple of lines to remind you to leave a turning gap. Okay, I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine now, and when I come back I'll show you how to pink the edges and trim the corners, and we'll turn it through. So here we have the finished front pocket. So what I'm going to do is trim. I'm not going to trim every seam because you don't really need to, but I'm going to trim around here with the pinking shears because this is a shortcut instead of having to clip and notch the seam. So I'm going to do the top as well, and then we'll just trim the corners. Now, one thing I forgot to say before is when I have corners like this, because I am really heavy-handed with the point turning tool, I tend to drop my seam length right down to about 2. So with any luck, that means that I won't be at risk of poking any little ends out. So that's it. I will just show you quickly the difference it makes to press the turning gap back. You can do this with your fingers, or you can do it with your iron. I've put all the turning gaps in the side of all of the smaller things because I found it easier, because there's quite a few curves and things at the bottom. So here we go. Let's turn it through. I've said to leave 1.5 inches, but if you really are not very able with your fingers, nimble, you can easily leave more. So I've got a new camera set up at the moment, so if I fall off the screen, I do apologise. It's because I'm not actually used to where I've put it, but I promise I will get better. So here we go, poking out the corners. And then where that turning gap is, it's pretty straight now. You always get a tiny bump just at the edges, but by the time you've pressed that and stitched it, it should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and press this, and then we'll place it in position. So this is take 2 because originally I forgot to say top stitch, so all the edges. It's worth it in the long run because it looks so neat and it will stop things from rolling when you use them. So what we need to do now, taking our piece, you can remember we drew our position on here, and the first thing I'm going to do is put the straight side in position. So you can either pull it slightly so it covers over the chalk, or you can actually do it so you can see the chalk. And what you need to do is try and remember to put your pins in the direction that you're going to be stitching so you can take them out more easily. So there's 1, 2, and then we're going to turn around and do the other straight side. Again, make sure it's in the correct position at the top. And then a final pin at the bottom. So again, it's almost like you're pulling this upwards to fit the straight edge, but what you'll see then is the curve that we've got does actually then fit perfectly, because all the fullness has been drawn up to form the pocket itself. So I will just go and take that now over to the sewing machine. I'll stitch this on and then I will show you what it looks like when it's done. And here we have it. This is your finished front pocket. So I'll lift it up so you can see. So I've edge stitched around as close to the edge as you can get, and just lock stitched at the top to hold it nicely in place. And that's it. This front pocket is now, the pocket and the front pocket is now finished with, and we can put it to one side and work on the next lot of storage, which is on the back. So here we have the pieces for the scissor holster or secateurs holster, depending on if you want to use it for sewing or gardening. And I've gone ahead and drawn on the seam allowance like I did before, including the turning gap. So I'm now going to go and take this over to the sewing machine and sew it, remembering to drop the stitch length right down to 2 around each of the corners so that I don't poke out the ends. See you in a minute. So I have trimmed off the corners like I did before. Haven't bothered to trim down at the rest of the seams because it's fine, it's a small seam anyway. And I'm going to press back the turning gaps again. And now I'm going to turn it through. There we go, let's just press that. My points on this are not brilliant, but there are 2 ways you could easily improve that. One is to make sure the interfacing doesn't go into the seam allowance, which you generally do with dressmaking anyway. And the other is a brilliant tutorial for turning collar points, which is on the Closet Core website. I'll try and drop a link below for it. Involves using a little piece of thread as you go around the corner, and it's absolutely ingenious. When you do it with collars, you get the most perfect collars. So that's fine enough for me, because by the time it's been curved, nobody's going to see it anyway. So next I'm going to top stitch the top and the bottom, and then we'll get our back and put this in position. Here we have it, top stitched top and bottom, and this is really straightforward this time. So place your piece where shown by the marks. Pin it in position. And then stitch. And you can do this all in one go if you like. You don't have to wait until it's stitched, but we're going to lift up the piece and place it on the other side. I like to stitch it first and then lift up and stitch, but you can do it how you want. I'm going to go and take that away and do that now, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Here we have it, the pocket. As you can see, it's stitched down on both sides. I stitched it going in the same direction, so I went bottom to top for both sides. It makes it easier because particularly with something like this that has a diagonal seam, it could grow if your foot pressure is quite high. So there we go, and just to show that it works, that's it. And I know it fits gardening secateurs as well. Now we're on to the next pocket. So here's our pocket piece. If you're using a directional print, bear that in mind because obviously we're going to be folding this in half, so one half would end up upside down. So we fold it up. I would put a couple of little marks to remind yourself to leave a turning gap, and then going to stitch round, and I would suggest you stitch here and downwards and then here and around. I will go and do that, and then I will show you the next stage. So here we are again. It's the usual thing, snipping off the corners. Pressing the turning gap and then turning through. That's it. Let's get rid of these annoying little bits. And now, unlike most pockets which have the folded edge as the top, this time you're going to have the stitched edge as the top. So I'm going to go and top stitch that, and then we'll position this on the back. So here we have the back again. Now these actually are designed to line up on the top. So you're going to place it here along the line and top stitch or edge stitch, so you're very close to the edge, and then you're going to lift it up and do the same on the other side, so you end up with a big loop. I'll go and do that, and then we will pleat the bottom of the pocket. So you can see we've got our lovely loop. It's quite a bit bigger than the back because we're going to put pleats in this. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure to find the centre point of the back of where the pocket's stitched on. So it's 3.5 inches from edge to edge. So at 1 3/4, I'm going to make a mark. Then for the pocket, I'm going to hold it and find the centre point by pressing it to crease it slightly. I like to just put a pin in there to hold that. And then we're going to match those two marks. Yeah. Let's pop that pin in. And then we're going to pleat it so the pleat pretty much ends up over the edge of the fabric of the underside of the pocket, and pin. Pins will create some bulk, so you probably want to take them out before you start stitching, but it's plenty good enough to hold it before you actually get to the sewing machine. There we go. So I'm going to stitch across the bottom to hold that, and the next thing we're going to do is make the straps. So these two pieces are going to become the straps. I'm going to fold these in the way we will normally fold straps, and then we're going to unfold them and finish off the bottom so that we can actually top stitch around in a U shape. So first of all, wrong sides together, right sides out. Press the centre crease, open it out, and press again. Bring the other side into the centre as well, and press one more time. There we go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open it back out again, and we're going to press a 1/4 inch seam on the bottom. Now it's a really tiny amount. If you felt more comfortable with pressing a 1/2 inch, you're welcome to do so. I don't like to waste fabric because I love my fabric so much and want to use all my scraps if I can. So I'm just using 1/4 inch. Of course, you can also decide to eyeball it, and if you do that, just make sure that you check the second strap is the same length as the first. There we go. Now this is a good opportunity to use your fabric glue stick just to base those edges in. So now you're going to fold it all back in again. Give it a press and just make sure those little corner pieces are tucked inside so you don't have little stragglers, little ends sticking out. There we go. So I am going to do the second one. Make sure it matches the same length, and then I'm going to top stitch them. There we go. So here we have our two straps. I'll just lift that up so you can see. So they're top stitched at a 1/8 of an inch all the way around neatly, and I used my hump jumper at the corners here to make sure I could actually get round and get it started properly to keep the stitching nice and even. So the next thing we're going to do is take the back, and I have just transferred the marks again because I didn't, they do tend to fade sometimes in use unless you use something like a friction pen. So put the pattern piece back down, put the marks on. They're not showing up here because they're on something pale, but luckily they show up on the outside. So at least I know where the edge of the strap needs to go. So take your straps, and the side that you think is best, put that with that facing upwards, because when this is actually stitched on, it will actually come forwards like this. So also helps if you've got something directional, you know that which direction is that the bottom will be the bottom on the front, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Who knows? Here we go. So just need to stitch across this at 1/8 of an inch down to baste it in position to hold it for the final stages. So now we're going to take our fabric A and fabric B pocket pieces and we're going to place them right sides together to join them and complete this section. So if you flip it over and stitch from this side, from the side with the fleece on it, the fleece is actually smaller by just over 1/4 of an inch than the actual main fabric, so it means you've got a line to stitch against. Obviously you can use your 1/4 inch foot as well. So the turning gap has been left inside on this piece, and you definitely need to leave a bigger turning gap, so I've suggested around 3 inches, but again you can use what you want. There we go. So I'm just going to mark on my turning gap so I don't forget. And then I'm going to take that away and stitch it together. Here we are. I have stitched, so mostly I followed the line of the pattern if there's any curves, because it makes it a lot easier than using the 1/4 inch foot, and then I've gone to my 1/4 inch foot on any of the straighter edges. So we're going to fold back and press the seam allowance around the turning gap as before. And then I'm going to do the same as I have done on the smaller pieces. I'm going to use my pinking shears to go around the curves to trim them down, and then I'm going to clip the points of the corners so that there's less bulk. And now it's time to turn through. Now we press. Usually what I do with something that's lined, I actually try and favour the seam so the lining is completely hidden, but in this case I don't want to do that. I want the seam to be right on the edge, because it'll be almost like a little peak of colour there once it's stitched together. Just going to pop that on to hold it together so it doesn't fray too much. I'm using a linen blend fabric for the underside, but quite heavyweight with a loose weave, and it is definitely fraying a bit. There we go. So what I'm going to go and do now is top stitch all around the top seam, and then we will do the same as this but for the back. So there we go, there's the top stitching just on that section, because the rest of it will get top stitched when we join everything. Let's pop it to one side. And now we're going to do exactly the same with the back. Now I will say to you, when you're coming round here, you will definitely need your hump jumper when you get to this section, because it's pretty close to the seam. So I'm going to pin these edges together. On the back, the join is in the bottom. Let's go. So when you come to stitch this, just make sure that you don't catch the straps when you're stitching. You can probably feel for them inside, and other than that, just stitch it round, leave the gap in the bottom. So we've got the same process again, and we're going to press up that seam allowance just at the bottom. We're going to clip our curves using our pinking shears, trim our corners, and then turn through. Of course, it's actually much easier to turn through with this piece, because you've got the straps to pull on. There we go. There we go. I'm just going to give this a good press, and then I'll take it over and top stitch just that top edge again. So here we have our pocket nicely top stitched with all the pieces attached, and we have the back with all the pieces attached, including the straps. And I've put a couple of clips in temporarily just to hold the turning gap closed, because I didn't want it poking out and getting frayed or anything. Now, one thing I would just say, if you have got any creasing and really want to press, this is the last real opportunity to press easily without having to stuff things inside. So go ahead and press if you need to. And then we are going to attach the two pieces together. So I'm going to take these clips out. I'm going to start at the bottom and try and centralise the corners and the flat base. I'm going to use a lot of clips on this, and we'll take them out as we sew. Now what you will notice straight away is this curve here is not the same as this curve here. That's because that's where it has splayed out to give it the fullness and lift the pocket. So I'm going to put a clip in right at the edge where it still matches, and then we're going to lift and maneuver everything round so it does create the same curve, and as we're doing that, it's starting to lift up the pocket. Now this is where you hope everything is nicely evenly stitched and the edges are the same length. However, it doesn't really matter. I've designed this so that the pocket starts a little bit down from the top of the back, just because who knows, it might grow as you're stitching it. It might be that you've stitched the two pieces different lengths. Nobody's really going to notice because they're not right next to each other. So you've got a little bit of leeway there. I've got a thread that's just doesn't want to be tucked inside. There we go. So I'm going to do the same for the other side. Yeah, so again, it doesn't match, and then you lift it up until it does match. And then you can see you're starting to get that shape there. I'll get the ruler out in a minute and we'll see if they are the same height, but do you know what, if they're not, it doesn't bother me. There we go. So, not far off. I think one's about 1/8 of an inch higher than the other. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, re-clip it and give it a little pull. But, and again, you could shrink this side down a little bit. But the thing is, once you actually start stitching round, unless you've got an amazing machine that is really good at keeping the tension even, it's going to stretch and grow as it goes. So you can see now why we needed to press beforehand, because this is now lifted, which is where your extra pocket comes in when it's in use. But that is now ready to take over to the sewing machine. So that's what I'm going to do. See you over there. So here we go, we're back at the sewing machine. I haven't shown you a lot of sewing in this video because this is the most straightforward sewing that you can do. Everything pretty much is 2 identical items, right sides together, stitch them, turn them through. So this though is a little bit different and more complicated, so I will show you. So started off in the middle of the bottom and I'm going to work through. I'm doing the easy side first. I've got my stitch length up to 3 and I've made sure that everything is lined up one over the other so that I know when I stitch through the top edge that I will be getting the bottom edge as well. I'll take my clips out as I go, and I will probably be pulling things around as I go as well. And I'm using the that little line there on my open-toed foot to help me to work out where the stitching's going. So I'm trying not to put my fingers in the way, but we've had this before. Everywhere that I like to put the camera, my fingers are in the way. I think it's just the way I sew. So if you come to a bit and you think, I'm not sure I've put that in quite where I want it, just move it slightly, pull it with your fingers. As you can see, you do actually find as you're stitching it will slightly stretch because of the thicknesses and all the layers moving against each other. I don't know if you can see, I've got my hump jumper to hand because the pieces inside, if I come up against something and I think, I'm meeting resistance, I'll pop the hump jumper in straight away to make sure my stitching remains nice and even. the turning gap. You can see you do sometimes get a tiny little jump in the fabric. I'm taking these last couple of clips out because I can see this is definitely growing a little. Then we're planning to stitch all the way to the top. What I am going to do quickly is reverse back over that join because that will take more strain. There we go. Going to snip that thread. So you can see that's joined pretty neatly. Yeah, a couple of places I haven't got it quite right, but that's absolutely fine. So let's try this. You can see I've got the piece rolled up here. Hopefully when it swings round it won't interfere with the camera. If it does, I'll just stop and move it again. Okay, so what I do need to do is make sure that I'm going to start in the right place. I'm not quite. So I told you I might hit the camera. Right, there we go. So I'm going to start with a lock stitch. And then we'll do exactly the same as we did on the other side. We'll slowly stitch round, checking to make sure our edges are aligned wherever possible. So on this side of the foot, there's a little triangle in the middle of the foot, which points to where the centre is. And what I like to do is I like to run my fabric along the left-hand edge of the triangle, and that shows me where to edge stitch. And obviously you can actually use an edge stitching foot or something instead. I'm going to go very slowly on this so that I make sure that I get the angle right. So it's much harder this time because you've got the bulk of this pushing against the edge of the machine. Nearly round. You need to also feel for the point where the pocket is, the edge of the pocket, because you will probably need to use your hump jumper there. There it is. So, it's not that high, so you shouldn't need to use the thick end, just the thin end. In as far as you can, and that just raise everything up. take out both those last two clips. You know, I'm going to cut those two threads off because they are really annoying me. And they're going to be stitched over anyway. There we go. And we're nearly there. So again, I'm going to just stop and reverse stitch over that end. You could, if you have a rivet press, put in a rivet at each side, because that would be a nice blingy feature and would give it a bit of stability. Right, we're done. And you can see that's not too bad. Let's look on the other side as well. Light's not very good here. We are finished. So I'm going to take you back over to the flat lay so you can actually look down and see what we have completed. So here we are. We have finished all of our top stitching. So let's bring that up so you can see. It means the closing gaps have both been sealed, and we now have a nice pouch. Now, what we're also going to need to do is flip this over and stitch it down. Now, you need to do it about an inch from the top. So I'm just going to hold that and put some clips in it. Now I'm actually not going to stitch this one. I am going to use poppers. This is for me, and I tend to wear a belt all the time. So rather than putting a belt on over my belt, I'm actually going to clip this onto my belt as I'm working. I will show you a couple of examples that have been stitched so you can see exactly what you're doing. There we go. So what I'm going to use is some pearlized snaps. I'll show you. There we go. I am not going to do it on camera because it's a bit of an effort to use the rivet press, and I don't want to make any funny noises. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach two. I've got some bigger snaps. Under those circumstances I would probably only attach one, but there we go. That's what it's going to look like when it's finished, and you'll see it at the very end when I do my on-camera work. What I'll do though quickly is show you exactly what you're doing if you're stitching it. Pop that to one side. So here is one of my test versions. Absolutely love this fabric, it's so pretty. And I'm showing you this because I used a contrasting thread for all of the top stitching. So you can see there what I've done is I have stitched it round in a box so that I can thread a belt through it. And then again, one last version. This one. This is my neatest one, as it should be because it's the one for the pattern. And you can see I've gone over the stitching at the bottom and the sides and then just stitched across. And on the back you just see a little box. So that's it for all the sewing today. We will do a recap and then I'll say goodbye. So you've done it. As you can see, I have put mine here on the my little mini-me and showed you it loaded up with my sewing equipment. So clips in the front. I forgot to mention you've also got this lovely pocket which you can fit any scraps of fabric or anything else you need to pick up and hold with you. So to add a belt, as you can see, this belt is one of my family's cargo trousers belts, which I'll probably have to give back because it sounds like it's an important one, but I borrowed it just for now. But if you want to, you could always make yourself a belt using webbing. So this is webbing I just had in the drawer, and all I've done is I have added two double, the D-rings, but they're the rectangle shaped D-rings together, and as you can see, just finished off that end. Just thread it through. We've all seen belts like this before. It took me a minute to do. I think it probably took me longer to find the bits and pieces to make it than it actually did to make it. So definitely recommend, if you don't have a spare belt, make one just like this. Now, this technique that I used for this pattern, whereby you make each section separately and then just stitch it all together at the end, I've done in previous patterns. So if you like this technique, I can recommend this pattern here, which is the little crossbody phone bag. Again, it's got 3 separate pieces completely made up, and then you put it together at the very end. And my best-selling pattern, which is the gorgeous glasses case. So nice and straightforward. Again, you make up the pieces, stitch it together at the end, which makes them a really fast sew and really great if you don't want to be faffing around with linings. So what I would say now is thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can show me your sew and sew side pouches. Other than that, obviously follow me here on YouTube, like and subscribe. Follow me on Facebook, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on Instagram, and I also am the co-owner of a brilliant Facebook group called the So Fabulous Fabrics Club. Okay, bye for now, see you at the next video.